Queen must listen to all, she reminded him, the highborn and the low, the strong and the weak, the noble and the venal. One voice may speak you false, but in many there is always truth to be found. Daenerys Targaryen is arguably the central feminine character of Game of Thrones, and an archetypal creation that marks a significant milestone in today's fiction. Despite having been deprived of all that she was meant to inherit, converted into a runaway, and sold by her own brother, she rises from the ashes and brings back to life that about which only legends remain. Behind her young age hide sufferings of a grown-up woman, wisdom of an old crone, and experience of a great empress. But the young age is there still, and despite having to grow up fast, she retains a bit of that naivety and innocence that accompany it, thus uniting the three feminine archetypes, the maid, the mother, and the crone, in one. Sic parvis magna, thus greatness from small beginnings comes. That would be Dany in one sentence. Despite her strong connection to the supernatural and a position of power, she's building a path towards the understanding that the greatest wisdom is hidden in things as common as the sufferings of a human heart. But in a world of raw power and cruelty that easily undermines moral values, paths towards resentment and fury beckon sweetly. Those who aspire to tame the beast within, as Socrates suggested, are the true heroes. But as Game of Thrones also shows us, many fail. Although the future of the story is unknown to us at the moment, I'll try to shine some light on Dany's psyche and the rich symbolism surrounding her character. I will also analyse the possible connections to ancient mythological symbols. Utilising what we know, I'll try to elucidate whether any Season 8 scenario is a possible future for Daenerys. As a bonus, we'll look at the symbolism of the number 3 in relation to Dany. Background. It's important to recall that Dany had a very traumatizing childhood. She was being constantly abused by her brother and on a perpetual run from the enemy. At the age of 13, she's sold as a child bride by her own brother to a savage and uncouth people whose language she doesn't even speak. She almost gets assassinated, has to watch her brother die, falls pregnant and loses her child and husband under truly sinister circumstances. And all this is just the beginning. It may seem highly unrealistic for someone of that age to survive all of this from the point of view of our era, but it wasn't exactly unusual in the past. Main characters in Game of Thrones, in general, are required to grow up mentally at an incredible pace because the circumstances demand so. It's like natural selection. If you fail to develop both aspects of yourself, you'll be trampled like Eddard Stark was. He's a very good example of what happens when we ignore our shadow, and indeed, even his unconscious forewarned him of his fate with the Winterfell crypt dream. Whereas Daenerys Targaryen would be an example of what happens when we succumb to the shadow. One-sidedness is the root cause of neurosis. The fight of Dany and Jon both is that of keeping the one-sidedness at bay by integrating their shadow. Such horrible experiences would easily provoke falling into one-sidedness. As we will see, at the moment it hasn't been fully resolved, and so the danger of falling into it is there until then. So, seeing her difficult background, how exactly is Dany capable to grow and retain her sanity in such circumstances? This piece of dialogue demonstrates what happens there. First, to make such a Sophie's choice, partial repression has to take place. Surely you've told yourself things like, "It's fine if I don't take the garbage out, surely my mother won't get mad." Despite knowing fully well, thanks to the past experiences, that indeed it will happen. It's just the tiny possibility won't that is taken hold of. As such, it allows you to proceed with the thing you'd rather do without worrying too much. You'll still worry, but not as if you fully admitted the reality. Hence why I call it partial repression, as a bit of awareness is preserved. In Dany's case, this happens first with the horse, and then when she says, "If I look back, I am lost," as looking back or reflecting too much on things long gone would plunge her into neurosis. But true growth pushes our sanity right next to the verge of its separating line with neurosis. Dany was just an obedient girl full of fear, a mere puppet in the hands of her cruel brother. After his betrayal, she's thrown into the world of adult and has no other choice but to mature quickly and adapt or to perish. This first stage of development begins with her marriage and culminates in her dissociation when watching her brother die. The childhood dream is over and there remains no way to bring it back. Watching Viserys die was clearly a huge event in Dany's psyche. After Sir Willem Darry, who had been the only positive father figure in Dany's life at that point, and who still preserved with the image of the Red Door a home in her memory, Viserys became the only father-like person she's had in her life, as well as the target of Oedipal idealizations further perpetuated by the practice of incest in the Targaryen bloodline. No matter how ruthless he was, she cherished him still. With his death, the possibility of retrieval of this home would seem to die, but instead something unexpected happens, and therein comes the usefulness of neurosis. It doesn't die, but is now taken into one's own hands. Daenerys, instead of accepting the hand she'd been dealt, learns from this experience and takes the responsibility for herself into her own hands. She takes the place of Viserys, the Targaryen king, and becomes the ruler, the son. This is later symbolically supported by the death of the son of her life, Drogon, as she substitutes him, becoming the animus figure. Had Viserys and Drogon not died, this would have never happened. She starts developing into an independent individual for the first time in her life, which again is another stage that culminates in the hatching of the dragon eggs. The growth happens because the father imago is withdrawn back into the self, enriching and expanding it. Child loss and rebirth. Paradoxically, Daenerys psychologically and the dragons physically are reborn through Rhaego's death. In a way, what happens is a simple exchange of roles. Rhaego was meant to be the divine child. This role is then taken by Daenerys. She's a child who survives despite the harsh circumstances, but now she flourishes in these circumstances, thus embodying the divine child archetype. This event marks the beginning of her role as a messiah. Her passage through the fire serves the role of baptism that's traditionally done with water, which symbolizes the vast unconscious, and that's why it also becomes an object of projection of the mother imago. She becomes a mother of dragons as she symbolically births them in the fire, or breathes life, which is equated symbolically with fire, into them. Just like the words of the spirit in Faust, although it refers to water, see the similarities with glowing and blending, forms unending, birth and the grave. Water and fire are closely linked in mythology as both can give and take life. Historically, one was born through water when it breaks and died in fire on a pyre. Therein comes the only death can pay for life reference as well, as Lot had to die in order for this rebirth to take place. In a way, this also symbolizes individuation with three dragons and the person in the middle, thus having the full quaternity, a symbol of individuation. The fact that we have serpents, dragons, in the image further supports this. However, we must also know the dangers that accompany this. For one, all the deaths that led up to this event have to be dealt with psychologically, which hasn't been the case, as we can clearly see how they all haunt Dany in her dreams till towards the end of the last book. Another danger is the Messiah complex. As a sort of a coping mechanism, Dany engenders the role of a Messiah. It's to either use the power to break the wheel of injustice she can't stand, or to retreat into the dream realm of the Red Door. The complex is therefore not necessarily a bad thing, as it can be used to aid decisiveness. The personality thus grows instead of stagnating or retreating. The story also gives her the characteristics of a messiah, thus uniting the inner psychological processes with the outer events. From the point of view of the large scale, there is no escaping this role. As Jung points out, the archetypal image of the Redeemer surfaces when the society needs drastic change of its erroneous ways. In this case, Dany is there to embody it. She performs miracles, such as revival of dragons, is unburned by fire, has visions, manages to free the slaves, and all is only a young girl without any resources to begin with. When the pale mare hits, she ventures out amidst the sick and helps them bury their dead and care for their hurt. She even washes their feet, which is a clear reference to Christ and his humbleness and love. All this is sincere without any ulterior motives. She also reflects on the immoral aspects of her actions, which is something that doesn't happen in personality disorders such as narcissism or obsession with the will to power. See my Tywin video for comparison. This is consistent throughout the whole series. Daenerys is clearly driven by her duty to free the people from their suffering. She marries Hizdahr, whom she doesn't love, and even postpones her return to Westeros to prioritize that. At the same time, the danger may come from using the savior role to justify cruel actions. Such position gives one the right to pass judgment onto others without any restrictions or guides other than one's own moral compass. Spider-Man's attitude before the events that lead to his uncle's death show what happens when the ego is consumed by this complex. That's something that may make one prone to corruption. However, in Dany's case, the complex is used to aid the partial repression I mentioned before. She's faced with having to make decisions in difficult situations. Regardless of the side one chooses, there are immoral aspects to it. For example, leaving the slaves alone versus freeing them, both are against Dany's moral compass, and so she uses her duty to justify her actions. If that wasn't the case, it's likely that she would fail to do anything or remain stuck in the indecision, as neurosis will take apart the conscious personality, which is the worst case scenario for the psyche. Indeed, making an incorrect decision is often less painful than being stuck in the undecisive state. This is because the libido is freed up and one can move on. Of course, that will lead to questionable decisions, which is demonstrated when she burns Mirri Maz Duur or orders the slave masters to be killed. But remember that she regretted it as she watched them die, and that she was driven by the fact that they killed and impaled children. We can sense the conflict between what she believes has to be done to establish her position as a ruler, so that she can free the slaves, and between her moral principles. This rather resembles Jon Snow's arc, about whom I also have a video. In terms of character rightness or wrongness, as long as the decisions are made with the awareness of both sides, the danger of becoming evil or too benevolent and therefore blind, i.e. one-sided, is low. What lies within the heart of Daenerys? Rather than sharing the grandiose fantasy of power Viserys was obsessed with, her dream has always been very simple and of a small scale: a home, a family, a place to belong to. In the very beginning of the book series, we learn that the jewels and the silks, Dragonstone and King's Landing, the Iron Throne and the Seven Kingdoms, all they have taken from us, we will have it back. Viserys lived for that day. All that Daenerys wanted back was the big house with the red door, the lemon tree outside her window, the childhood she had never known. Daenerys wants a simple life. She doesn't see herself as a grandiose ruler. She's a simple girl with simple desires, a home and a family. This is who Daenerys Targaryen truly is, and this is whom she has to overcome to carry the burden of immense responsibility. In fact, she doesn't even like the idea of unlimited power, as she finds it separating and lonesome. Surely we could theorize about her emotionality prevailing over her reason sometimes, but this is really tricky. If we juxtapose her inexperience, young age, sense of justice, circumstances, influence of her dreams and visions of what a ruler should behave like, with the rationality of the decisions, we come to the conclusion that even the questionable decisions made were much more likely due to the interplay of these, rather than to a cruel whim. From a strategical perspective, these decisions simply had to be made. They were the same gesture as Jon Snow's beheading of Jaina's Slynt, throwing the prisoners into the ice cells, or parting the baby from his mother, but many seem to oversee this. I think that we have become too accustomed to bowing our head in our society. Whether we like it or not, sometimes force must be used to protect what one holds dear, or to stop others from causing more harm. Using the "I don't condone war" card is simply ridiculous in situations where it means watching injustice with crossed arms. I therefore think that the books don't show any indication of Daenerys turning into the delusional take on her character in Season 8 of the show. It's also unwise to compare her to an experienced strategist like Tywin Lannister, or expect her to submit her emotions to justice like Eddard Stark. Besides, both are on rather extreme ends of the spectrum of the ways to rule, as they've been shown to fail miserably, either because of too much morality or too much cruelty. I think that Dany and Jon both have the potential to find the right balance. Whereas Jon may struggle more with an overwhelming, even irrational sense of morality, Dany may struggle with the burden of strategic cruelty. A possible danger here could be self-deceit, whose basis is an unconscious will to power, and with it potential development of paranoia. For this, collaboration is a cure, because it supports self-reflection. Incorporating trust and cooperation into ruling will prevent the danger of paranoia and isolation. The good news is Daenerys is aware of this. She always repeats to herself that the dragon has 3 heads, meaning that there must be collaboration. The two find themselves amidst the same struggle, to be able to use fire and blood in the right moments and abstain from using them when inappropriate, and to manage to do so without going insane. To decide what the right moments are is the tricky part. And that's exactly what Aemon Targaryen's advice to Jon Snow means. Kill the boy, but please don't hack him into pieces. Build a man instead. They both clearly struggle between maintaining this intimidating image of a ruler and their true feelings, which seem to be in contradiction with each other. The aim is not to hide the feelings too much and not to get consumed by one's own vision of reality. Otherwise, the self may retreat into the shadow. Unless something really terrible happens, they're both headed in a good direction, I think. But hey, it's Game of Thrones, so, you never know. The problem of if I look back, I am lost. The mindset that drives Daenerys forward is based on the annihilation of the past, or rather of the yearning that's produced by the losses of the past. In and on itself, this seems like an effective ideology to build one's life around, to move on and to forget. But unfortunately, not only in terms of psychology, but in real-life situations, it doesn't work that way. The past needs to be revisited, reflected on, resolved, or at least worked on by resolving the present. By abandoning it, it doesn't disappear. It's repressed and transformed into resentment whose puppet we can easily become. Like a festering wound, it poisons the rest of the body slowly. In the moment, repression, or not looking back, helped Dany to make tough decisions. We could also view it as a sort of a natural repression we develop in the childhood to cope with the overwhelming experience of the reality. The true reason why she doesn't look back now, though, is out of fear. Here, we can recall the downfall of Anakin Skywalker, which started exactly with fear. In the desire to protect his loved ones, he ended up protecting his ego that would otherwise fall apart under the burden of the all-consuming fear. Deluded, he didn't look back, and that's why he became lost. Another danger is that of repressed grief, which could lead to insanity. If this partial repression keeps on mounting up, as soon as the cup is filled to the rim, a single drop more will make it overflow. The repressed content can overtake the consciousness, leading to madness. That's why looking back is actually important. No, you won't get lost if you reflect on the past. Important is not to get entangled in the what-ifs, which wastes the libido on stagnation rather than using it on growth. The trauma has to be reckoned with in order for the personality to grow, otherwise it will amalgamate into a beast lurking in the shadow, waiting for the right opportunity to strike. Such calmness as Daenerys demonstrated when she saw Viserys tortured to death is a defensive mechanism, but it gives one PTSD, which is clear from her dreams and has to be addressed afterwards. Dream and vision analysis. Dany's visions and dreams, in terms of personal meaning rather than their prophetic value, are rather straightforward really. The red door of an abandoned house, the hunting of the ghost of the past, stand in contrast to the Iron Throne, future Romans, and the prince that was promised. It's all linked by the past and the future. If I look back, I am lost. It's all about the past and the conflict between the desire to retreat there or to go forward, as well as about the underlying fear that the regrets of the past will consume one when looked upon too much. The two most frequent images in Dany's mind are that of the Red Door and the Iron Throne. These stand symbolically in contrast to each other to represent the two sides of Daenerys. The throne is dawn, the door is sunset. The throne is rising, seeking, progress, mastering oneself. Whereas the door is a return, regression, hiding inside, seeking security, returning to the past. In that sense, the throne represents a place of exposedness, whereas the door is a place that encloses and protects. The throne is the image of the future, the door of the past. Let me, however, emphasize that they're not as different as they're the same. Rather, they represent mirror images. The answer lies somewhere in between. The throne is going forward, the red door is going backwards. The one who gets to sit on the throne must climb above everything else, but the one who opens the door must first submit himself to uncertainty. The key is to incorporate both and find the balance. Thus, individuation can be achieved. Drogon. Interestingly, Dany rides the black dragon Drogon, the largest and most aggressive of the three, the one that cannot be chained, escapes, kills a girl, and is lured by blood. From what we know, the bond created between a dragon and a human is for life. A dragon can only be ridden by one human. That means that this is the dragon that Dany bonded with. I look at dragons much like I look at direwolves, representations of the spirit of their human. As Dany learns to control Drogon, she learns to control her fury and emotionality, but also grasps power and will perhaps from now on use it more decisively. I think this is a sign that she'll only keep on improving as a ruler, but we'll need to see how Drogon will behave and what she'll do. Some of the decisive events took place only at the end of the last book. How she will wield the dragon could represent a parallel to her decisions as a ruler and her psychological status quo. The number 3. As we know, Daenerys is tightly linked to the number 3, a child of 3, a mother of 3, and I'm quite sure she'll also be a wife of 3. With the number 3, it's important to remember that there is always a fourth, which forms the unity. If you notice, she represents the fourth element, or that which unites the 3. Similarly, the 3 dragons need a fourth element, the dragon riders. I think that this refers to the 3 Targaryens that will also be dragon riders. Jon Snow, Daenerys, and possibly Fagin, the fake dragon, or someone who will steal a dragon, like Victarion or Euron, potentially, or one of the dragons could end up with a Targaryen we don't know about. Or maybe it's Tyrion. Priest Benero does mention that he's snarling in the midst of the dragons, but I think that it means that he's just acquainted with all the 3 dragons, which would then mean Daenerys, Jon and Fagin. This is also supported by when George Martin said that, quote, 3 heads of the dragon, yes, but the third will not necessarily be a Targaryen, end of quote. I would go with Jon, Dany and Fagin, since the idea is that the dragon has 3 heads, meaning that they all must be dragons, except that not necessarily truly. Dany would be the aware dragon, Jon the unaware, since he doesn't know he's one, and Fagin the fake one. Note that he said the third won't be a Targaryen, meaning that at least 2 will definitely be Targaryens. Mythology. The Great Mother archetype. Daenerys clearly represents the Great Mother archetype. She becomes the mother of dragons and the mother of the enslaved. Although very young, she embodies the mother-like quality strongly, which gives her a very mature mindset. Like a mother, she's willing to sacrifice herself for her people. She's already experienced birth and death of a child, which is something that marks a woman for good. She finds a way to free up the bottled up energy that remained unused for her dead child by transferring the motherly love towards the dragons and the slaves. The most important of all the maternal goddesses was Isis, the prototype of motherhood and embodiment of fidelity. She was the moon goddess, and her husband and brother Osiris was the sun god. The moon goddess. The moon goddess is therefore one of the aspects of the Great Mother. We know that Dany was called the Moon of My Life by Khal Drogo, who was her sun and stars. This theme is very ancient and dates back to the creation myth. In most places, the sun is masculine and the moon is feminine. In Iron Age, the feminine was the dragon mother, the earth and moon, darkness, chaos, confusion, nature as emptied of spirit, and what was masculine was the sky father, the heaven and sun, light, order, clarity, spirit as freed from nature. The Paleolithic people saw the 3 aspects of the mother archetype in the moon. The crescent moon was the maiden, the full moon, the pregnant woman, the mother, and the waning moon, the wise old crone. The Serpent Goddess. The Serpent Goddess, one of the aspects of the Grey Mother, represents the creative source of the universe. She's generally associated with both rejuvenation and decay. Her image combines the female and the masculine aspects in one, the woman and the serpent, thus uniting life and death. She's also often linked with water, possibly connected to the water in the womb, the water of life. Also, the serpent, with its fluid, slithering and quick movement, came to symbolize the dynamic power of life represented in the flow of water. With water is also associated the egg, the source of life, which first comes alive in the waters of the womb. Interestingly, goddess, serpent, egg and bird are four elements that are inseparable in the mythic images of old Europe. With dragons being winged serpents, we see unification of all these symbols in Daenerys. The Serpent Goddess reappears on Crete as the goddess of life, death and regeneration, but with a new distinctness. She often appears with 3 snakes, which appear as a manifestation of her power to give and take life, also associated with a serpentine regenerative power, thanks to the sloughing of its skin, hibernation and continual awakening. She's often depicted holding 2 with the third is intertwined, a caduceus-like image. The number 3 itself is the symbol of unity. This could also make her a double-edged sword, however. Even the snake itself has also a poisonous aspect. She symbolizes the gift of nurture and the womb that gives forth, but also takes back life. She's the weaver of the web of life and is associated with the moon and lunar phases. In this goddess, the reconciliation and transcendence of opposites takes place. This would also align with the idea of a song of ice and fire. The Corn Queen. I discussed the myth of the Corn King in the video about Jon Snow. This myth represents the death of a deity descended to the earth and killed there only to be resurrected and reborn amongst the gods. Just like this myth, the myth of the Corn Queen or the Corn Mother that accompanies it arose from the observation of the cycle of decay and revival of vegetation associated with harvest. On a more profound level, it represents the death and rebirth myth. Traditionally, the last corn standing in the field is made into a puppet or a doll called the Corn Queen or the Corn Mother. Ceres, a branch of a tree, is stuck in her breast and set in the middle of the floor. Dances follow, after which the puppet is pulled to pieces and placed on the pyre. She's either thrown into the river to secure plenty of rain for the next year's crop, or is burned and her ashes strewn on the fields, or corn seed is scattered among the new corn for her fertilizing power. In either case, death and rebirth are the core of the process the Corn Queen represents. Interestingly enough, in Western Prussia, a figure made out of the last corn sheaf used to be called a bastard, and a real boy would be wrapped up in it by a woman. The unwrapping of the boy represented his birth. In some cultures, the triad of the feminine archetypes, the crone, the mother and the maiden I briefly discussed in my video about Sansa and Sandor, are also manifested in the myth of the Corn Queen. The first corn represents the old that must die and wither for good, and the last corn represents the new that must be sacrificed and reborn. The same idea can be found in Game of Thrones, with the old queen Cersei holding onto the power with the knowledge that the end is inevitable, and the rising new power in the young queen Daenerys, or Marjorie or Sansa, that will substitute it, but only after passing through a great many trials.